Aya Wilson is tired of being overlooked. She's won titles, earned MVPs, and led her team like a champion. But the spotlight still gravitates toward Caitlin Clark. The recent LPGA deal only amplified the divide, and Wilson didn't hide her anger. But here's the problem. Frustration doesn't build empires. While Wilson calls out the imbalance, Clark is building her brand across sports, securing partnerships by staying focused and letting her actions, not her emotions, do the talking.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Wilson's public bitterness doesn't look strong. It looks stuck. And in a moment that could have sparked collective momentum, she chose to punch down instead of pivot forward. Clark's dominance in endorsements isn't luck. It's a reflection of how she's managed her image, her timing, and her reach. It's not about ignoring legacy, but about evolving with the times. The sports world now rewards those who blend performance with media savvy, and Clark embodies that shift. If the goal is lasting impact, then athletes like Wilson must stop expecting attention based solely on past accomplishments. Adapt or be outrun. That's the real message in this moment. Caitlin Clark just landed a multi-million-dollar contract with the LPGA Tour. And no, she's not switching sports. That's how big her brand is. She didn't pick up a golf club. She didn't change careers. She just brought so much value as a media figure and marketing powerhouse that an entirely different sport signed her to a crossover endorsement deal. That's not normal. It's next level. And as you'd expect, the women's sports world had a lot to say. But no one louder or more visibly frustrated than Aya Wilson. The second this deal went public, the reaction was immediate. Applause, shock, some confusion, and then the floodgates opened. Aya Wilson, the face of WNBA dominance, the two-time MVP, the champion who's carried the league through seasons of being overlooked and underpromoted, was not clapping. She was clearly fed up, and she made sure the world knew. What we're seeing right now is a full-on collision between legacy and marketability, and Caitlin Clark didn't just walk into that dynamic. She blew it wide open. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Caitlin Clark has become a media juggernaut, and she's done it by playing the game exactly right. She's not out here firing off tweets or calling out critics. She's not weighing in on the controversy or pushing back at headlines. She's doing what most marketable athletes are coached to do. Stay silent, stay clean, stay visible. And it's working. Clark's silence is strategic. It's powerful. She's letting the narrative do the heavy lifting while she just keeps growing her empire. Her brand value is skyrocketing not just because she's talented, but because she knows when to say nothing at all. That kind of discipline in today's media landscape is rare. And brands? They eat it up. Now contrast that with Aya Wilson, who's been very vocal. She's been out here putting in the work on and off the court for years, winning titles, stacking MVPs, doing interviews, using her voice to push for equity, and yet she's still watching someone newer and less decorated get the kind of attention and endorsements she's never had access to. Her reaction? Completely understandable, but also not helping. Wilson's public frustration highlights a deeper problem. Because she's right, there's a systemic issue. There's a pattern of underrecognition, especially for players like her who've built the foundation of the WNBA's credibility. But the way she's responding, calling it out in the middle of Clark's rise, only adds to the division. It makes her look like she's fighting for the spotlight rather than owning the one she's earned. And that's the tragedy here, because Aya Wilson should be part of the main conversation. She should be benefiting from the increased attention Caitlin Clark is bringing into women's sports. But instead of using that momentum, she's pushing against it. That's not strategy. That's ego. And a league? It's caught in the middle. On one hand, Caitlin Clark is doing exactly what they've been begging their stars to do for years. Generate buzz, bring in new fans, sell jerseys, go viral. On the other, their established legends like Wilson are feeling left behind, and instead of adjusting to the new marketing reality, they're pushing back with resentment. The LPGA deal made this dynamic undeniable. It wasn't about basketball. It wasn't even about sports performance. It was about crossover appeal, visibility, and who can sell. Clark's appeal goes beyond basketball. That's why the LPGA made the move. It's not just a win for Clark. It's a blueprint for how modern athletes can exist across sports, industries, and media platforms. But here's what Wilson isn't getting. Being great isn't enough anymore. Being vocal isn't enough either. You have to be strategic. You have to understand the way the spotlight moves now. Clark understands that. That's why her silence speaks louder than Wilson's words. And that silence? It's killing the competition. Because every time Wilson reacts, it just reinforces the idea that Clark is untouchable, unbothered, marketable, safe. That's the image sponsors want. It's not fair, but it's effective. And Wilson? She's still trying to win the game the old-fashioned way, through dominance, passion, and honesty, which is noble, but it's not working. Let's be clear, Clark isn't the problem. She didn't ask for this division. She's just doing her job and doing it better than most. She's excelling in the modern sports economy, where brand management is just as important as stats. Wilson, on the other hand, is stuck trying to be both the underdog and the veteran star. She wants the recognition she's earned, but instead of evolving her approach, she's playing defense, emotionally and publicly. And that's not how you get the bag in 2025. If anything, this is a wake-up call for the league and its stars. This is what the future looks like. Cross-sport deals, brand silence, persona management, sponsorships based on storylines, not just scorelines. The WNBA needs to get ahead of this. Because if they let this tension between Clark and Wilson fester, they risk dividing the very audience they've spent years trying to build. Right now, it feels like fans are being told to choose a side. Ride with the new media darling or stick with the overlooked veteran. But that's a terrible framework. It hurts both athletes, and it slows down the progress of the sport. Clark's LPGA deal should have been a moment to unify, not divide. A way to say, look how far women's sports are going. Instead, it exposed just how fractured the landscape really is and how far behind some athletes are in understanding the new rules of visibility. And for Aya Wilson, it's time to pivot, not just in attitude, but in approach. Use the moment. Build the brand. Step into the spotlight and own it. But the reactive frustration, the bitterness, it's not aging well. And worse, it started to alienate the very fans she worked so hard to earn. At some point, you have to ask, do you want to be right or do you want to win? Because Caitlin Clark is winning. Quietly, consistently, and with every brand that signs her, she's creating a new era of athlete influence. One that doesn't rely on who deserves it more, but who manages it better. If you've been watching this whole thing unfold, let's hear what you think. Is Aya Wilson being unfairly overshadowed? Or is Caitlin Clark just showing everyone how the new game is played? Drop a comment. Sound off. And if you want more breakdowns like this, where we dig into the drama, the deals, and the behind-the-scenes tension that's reshaping the sports world, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see what's really happening in women's sports right now. Because trust, it's not just about basketball anymore. Let's get one thing straight. Caitlin Clark didn't hijack the spotlight. She didn't force-feed the media headlines or demand a golf deal out of nowhere. The attention, the money, the crossover endorsements, that all came to her because she's become the walking definition of what sells in women's sports right now. Meanwhile, Aya Wilson is yelling into the void, wondering why the spotlight refuses to turn her way. But here's the issue. This isn't a Clark versus Wilson talent conversation. That's not even up for debate. Aya Wilson is a proven winner. She's delivered season after season, dominated on both ends of the floor, led her team to titles, and walked away with multiple MVPs. She's done the work. No shortcuts. No gimmicks. Just basketball. And that's exactly the problem. Because in 2025, just playing the game at a high level isn't enough to keep you in conversation. If your name doesn't move numbers off the court, if you're not creating a narrative that brands can buy into, you're invisible to the people holding the checkbooks. Caitlin Clark understands that. That LPGA contract wasn't just a random PR stunt. It was a strategic move, an intentional play that shows just how far her image can stretch. She's become an asset across sports, not just in basketball. The LPGA didn't sign her swing a 9-iron. They signed her because she brings buzz, Because she trends. Because her name sparks headlines without even trying. And Aya Wilson? She's trending for all the wrong reasons. Let's be honest. When Wilson reacts to these kinds of moves with public frustration, when she leans into the outrage, it doesn't come off as passionate anymore. It comes off as insecure. Not because her accomplishments are invalid, but because she's letting the spotlight pass her by while arguing for why she should have it. Here's the thing. Sponsors don't like tension. They don't like conflict. And they definitely don't like the perception of bitterness. When Wilson complains about media bias or unequal promotion, she might be telling the truth, but it doesn't change the result. It doesn't elevate her profile. It just highlights the fact that someone else is winning the game she thought she already mastered. And let's be clear, this isn't about race or respect or effort. This is about branding, about knowing how to ride the wave instead of splashing around in it. Caitlin Clark isn't out here asking for sympathy or demanding her flowers. She's just stacking deals and letting her silence build mystique. Every time Wilson lashes out, it feeds the machine. It adds to Clark's image as the composed, unbothered star that everyone wants to root for. That's the branding war, and Clark is playing chess while Wilson's still on defense. The worst part? This could have been a shared win. Clark bringing more visibility into women's sports should have been a boost for everyone, Wilson included. But instead of capitalizing on the new attention, Wilson positioned herself as the counterpoint, as if Clark's rise somehow invalidates Wilson's grind. It doesn't. But the way she's reacting, it makes it look that way. And it's doing real damage, not just to her image, but to the league. Because fans are starting to split. There's Clark's side and Wilson's side. The new wave versus the old guard. Marketability versus merit. But that kind of internal division is exactly what holds back women's sports. Instead of presenting a united front to grow the game, the league is now juggling drama and tension that should have never existed. If Wilson wanted to stay relevant in this new era, she had options. She could have teamed up with Clark, used her platform to lift the entire conversation. Instead, she decided to compete off the court and lost. This isn't to say she isn't right to be frustrated. She's absolutely right. The system has favored flash over substance for years. But complaining about it while the cameras are rolling doesn't change anything. It just puts the spotlight further away. Let's talk about the LPGA move again. Think about what it represents. It's not just a check. It's a signal to the entire sports industry. This is the kind of athlete we want now. Visible, flexible, quiet, marketable. An athlete who plays multiple lanes, whether or not she's actually in those sports. That's where Clark thrives. She doesn't just perform, she represents. And that kind of broad-stroke visibility is something Wilson's never leaned into. Not because she can't, but because she's still operating under the belief that dominance alone should be enough. It's not. The sports world has changed. Media presence now runs parallel to performance. Your brand isn't optional, it's your career. And Wilson refusing to adjust is exactly why she keeps getting leapfrogged by stars with less hardware, but more strategy. That's the tough pill to swallow. Clark doesn't speak much. She doesn't fight the media. She doesn't clap back or call out anyone. And yet, she's in headlines almost daily. That's not a coincidence. That's calculated. And it's working, because when you stay silent, people fill in the blanks. They project professionalism, humility, grace. Whether or not that's true, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Clark is in full control of her image. And that image, it's making her millions. Wilson, on the other hand, has no filter. And that vulnerability, that openness, it's admirable. But it's also been weaponized against her. It gives the media an angle. It gives sponsors a reason to hesitate. And the harsh truth is, authenticity doesn't always sell. In fact, sometimes it backfires. So here's the bottom line. Aya Wilson is being left behind not because she isn't great, but because she refuses to evolve. And in a media-driven sports economy, evolution isn't optional. It's the only way forward. The real question now is, what will she do next? Double down on the outrage? Or pivot? Build the brand? Shift the narrative? Step back into the spotlight with a smarter, sharper strategy. Because the game isn't played on the court anymore. It's played in the headlines, the ad campaigns, and the silence between interviews. Caitlin Clark mastered that game early. Aya Wilson is still catching up, and if she doesn't figure it out soon, she'll keep watching the spotlight pass her by while athletes half her age and with a quarter of her accolades cash checks in her face. That's not bitterness. That's business. The fallout from Caitlin Clark's LPGA contract is still unraveling, and it's doing more than just disrupting the endorsement landscape. It's cracking open years of unresolved tension in women's sports. The kind of tension that's been simmering under the surface every time a veteran player, like Aya Wilson, gets left out of the marketing blitz. And now, with Clark soaring into multi-sport superstardom, the divide is no longer subtle. It's loud, it's public, and it's threatening the very unity the WNBA desperately needs right now. Aya Wilson has been positioned as the gold standard of WNBA excellence. She's done everything right: dominant stats, consistent leadership, a championship resume, and an outspoken voice when it matters. She's been the cornerstone, the standard. But when she speaks now, it doesn't come across as confident. It sounds defensive. She's frustrated, and understandably so, but the way she's channeling it is only pushing her further from the spotlight she deserves. Instead of adapting to this media-driven environment, she's confronting it like it's still 2018. Like we're still in a time where talent alone drives headlines and brand deals. But we're not. Not even close. Athletes today aren't just competing on the court. They're competing on feeds, in algorithms, in curated narratives, and Wilson isn't even in the same conversation anymore when it comes to that. That's the part she doesn't seem to accept. The truth is, Caitlin Clark has flipped the formula. She's building her influence through subtlety, control, and a strategic kind of silence that makes her an advertiser's dream. Clark doesn't need to dominate the room. She just needs to walk into it. That alone moves numbers, drives conversations, and gets contracts inked. The LPGA partnership was a masterclass in this new era of athlete branding. They didn't need her to play golf. They just needed her to exist within their orbit. That's how strong her public image is. Meanwhile, Wilson's public comments about lack of visibility and unequal promotion, while valid, are being interpreted as complaints. And in a media ecosystem driven by likability and simplicity, complaints don't sell. If you're a brand and you have two faces to choose from, who do you go with? The rising star who quietly wins headlines and smiles through the pressure, or the seasoned vet who's battling the system out loud? It's not about fairness. It's about optics. And right now, Aya Wilson's optics are off. This isn't just a difference in personality. It's a failure to evolve with the times. Clark understands that athletes today are also products, and she's packaging herself with surgical precision. No controversy, no reactive posts, no messy interviews, just clean, curated success. That kind of polish isn't accidental. It's designed. It's deliberate. And it's why she's cashing checks outside her sport, while Wilson is still trying to fight for acknowledgement within hers. And let's call out the double-edged sword here. When Wilson speaks out, she's criticized for being too loud. But when Clark stays quiet, she's praised for being classy. That's real. That's a frustrating double standard. But it's also the game. And if Wilson wants to win it, she has to play smarter, not louder. Because let's be honest, brands don't reward frustration. They reward control. They want marketable icons, not cultural critics. And every time Wilson takes her grievances public, she's making herself less brand safe, not more visible. And here's where it gets more uncomfortable. Clark is now being positioned as the face of women's sports. Not just the WNBA, but the entire ecosystem. That's a huge leap for someone just entering the league. But it's happening. Fast. Because her name carries mainstream value. She trends beyond sports. She pulls in demographics leagues have never tapped into. That kind of crossover pull, it's rare. And the LPGA didn't hesitate to capitalize on it. Wilson had years to become that crossover figure. But instead of building a persona that translates, she's relied on the idea that performance alone will secure her place. That used to be enough. But now, performance is just step one. If you don't back it with narrative and brand alignment, you're invisible outside the box score. And that's exactly where Wilson is stuck. outperforming her peers while being outmarketed by them. Let's be clear, Caitlin Clark isn't better than Aya Wilson on the court. Not yet. That's not what this is about. This is about off the court. It's about who knows how to command attention without demanding it, and who understands that in this era, visibility isn't earned, it's engineered. Wilson's response to Clark's rise has been fueled by resentment rather than recalibration, and that resentment is starting to define her public persona. Not her stats, not her accolades, the tone, that defensive edge she brings to interviews, those digs that hint at bitterness. It's turning into her brand, whether she realizes it or not. And that's a bad brand to have, because the longer she clings to frustration, the more sponsors will walk away. They're not interested in controversy. They're not in the business of tension. They want narrative ease. And right now, Caitlin Clark offers that in droves. She's the headline, the moment, the fresh face that doesn't rock the boat. Wilson? She's the voice reminding everyone the boat has a leak, but nobody wants to hear that during a yacht party. If Aya Wilson wants to stay relevant, she needs to shift, not her values, but her approach. She needs to stop calling out and start calling in. Get strategic, build her own media momentum, reframe the conversation instead of resisting it. Because as long as she plays defense off the court, she's giving Clark, and every Clark-like athlete who follows, more room to dominate in ways she never even attempted. It's not too late, but the window is shrinking, because what the LPGA deal really exposed was a new reality for women's sports. Success isn't just what you do, it's how you're seen doing it. And Clark is seen as a visionary, a generational talent who doesn't get involved in petty drama and lets her team, her game, and her brand do the talking. That's why she's winning even when she's silent. Meanwhile, Wilson is out here giving quote after quote, and it's only making the gap look wider. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Wilson needs to stop chasing equality and attention and start earning it with strategy. That means building a brand that sponsors want, not just a resume fans respect. It means understanding that marketability is now a skill set, one she needs to start mastering. Because if she doesn't, she'll keep racking up awards while watching athletes with less experience, but better image control. Sign deals she'll never even see the pitch deck for. That's the shift. That's where we are now. And like it or not, Caitlin Clark didn't break the system. She played it better than anyone else in women's sports right now. That's not hype. That's fact. Let us know what you think. Is Aya Wilson losing the plot or just stuck in an outdated model? Is Caitlin Clark the future? Or is she just benefiting from a flawed system that needs to change? Drop your take in the comments. Like the video if you're here for real analysis that doesn't sugarcoat what's happening, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Share this with someone who still thinks talent alone is enough to win in 2025, because that era is over. This is the new playbook, and Clark's already pages ahead.